In the first edition of the Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith claims that he's the author. Later on, he changes it and says God's the author. Which one is it?
Well, again, here's the context of that understanding that you have to really look at. Most people don't bother to take the time. When Joseph Smith finished the Book of Mormon, the only way that you could publish it or have it printed was that you had to declare yourself the author. In other words, that was copyright law, and Joseph Smith had to follow copyright law, or he wouldn't get that book out. And so what that simply means is that he had to declare himself as the author. In fact, even today, if you went down to some publisher and declared that you had a book you want published, and you told the publisher that God wrote it, you probably wouldn't go too far. They would probably laugh you out the front door. Or even if you tried to put an article in the paper, go down in the newspaper and say, God wrote this and I want to put this in. See, Joseph Smith had to be wise in order to get this done. After he got the Book of Mormon done, however, he was able to change the copyright law later and have it be a translation from God in the text.
Okay. Why did the Book of Mormon have so many changes after it was printed?
Well, if you go back into the 18th century, 19th century or whatever, they didn't have very elaborate printing presses back there. In fact, they had to almost typeset everything by hand. And in the process, there were many errors made in the printing process. And they were in a hurry to get the Book of Mormon done. The guy who was printing the Book of Mormon was in a big hurry, and later we learned that he was an avowed anti-Mormon also. He wasn't very careful the way he printed the book. And when they got that done, you look at an 18th century copy of that first Book of Mormon that came off the press, and there are just hundreds of errors in it. You can just, they're so visible you can see them. You wonder what these guys were, whether they were drinking or something while they were putting the Book of Mormon together. And so in the process, there were sentences that didn't finish themselves right, the punctuation errors, and all kinds of problems with it that had to be changed. And yet, you had to have a book that people could read. Now, if you really look at the Bible, look at all the thousands of changes that have been taking place in the Bible, and more or less to make it easier to read. It's not something that you're doing to try to change the doctrine. And so there were things there were mistakes made, but even today, I printed a book, I authored a book. I couldn't believe all the times we had to go back to the drawing board and change spelling errors, grammatical errors. And yet you think about going back in that day and age, back at the time of Joseph Smith, I can imagine putting a book 500 or 600 pages together. What a horrendous job it would be, and how many errors you would have to correct. My book was only 180 pages, and I was pulling my hair out, just trying to get it done. And so even with the modern computer technology we have today, you still have that problem. Shakespeare made over 300 changes in his text when he was writing up one of his works. So that's common, and that really is made out to make it look like we were fudging, but it really is a normal thing when you publish a book, especially back then.
Okay. Walter Martin wrote a book called The Maze of Mormonism. In the book, Dr. D.J. Nelson translated the Book of Abraham and proved that it was not legitimate.
Well, we've since learned that D.J. Nelson was not legitimate. D.J. Nelson was not what he cranked up to be, and he was later proven to be a fraud.
You got proof of this?
I got proof. Here's a letter from the University of Chicago, the Oriental Institute of Chicago, where D.J. Nelson represented himself to have a degree, a doctor's degree, and Brother Brown, who decided to check up on this, wrote to them, and Nelson apparently never studied Egyptology or at the Oriental Institute. Bayer, the president, thinks it is quite unlikely that Nelson was commissioned to work on the papyri of the Mormon authorities. In fact, he doubts that he would have, under his credentials, he would have been able to understand a single word of Egyptian. If you'd like to look at this, this is a letter from the university there. And that's not all we got.
Okay. Well, I was under the understanding that he was a renowned Egyptologist. I can't... why would he lie about it?
Well, for one thing, we have to look at what he was doing. He was making a lot of money doing what he was doing. Now, I'd like to show you some more here. What I showed you is just the tip of the iceberg. I won't go through all of it. You'd have to get the book. It's called They Lie in Wait to Deceive. And all of the data about him is now accurately brought forth. In fact, he's been exposed to the public eye. And even the Christian churches don't buy him anymore. Here's an office from the Attorney General. And this is what he says. Since you're interested in the activities, now he says right here, here's his diploma from Pacific Northwest University, Graduate School, Philosophy of Doctor. He went around the country speaking, making thousands of dollars as an Egyptologist. And they sent a letter to the Office of the Attorney General to find out about this Pacific Northwest University. Since you are interested in the activities of Pacific Northwest University, I have enclosed for your information a copy of the complaint filed on behalf of the state of Washington and answered the submitted Mr. Archile Burke, who is the sole individual responsible for the diploma mill. It was a diploma mill. They were faking diplomas and selling them to the public, and you could get a diploma in any kind of degree that you wanted. I have also included some photocopies of pages from this deposition. Page 60, 61, and 69 reflect that it was strictly a one-man operation. He also indicated that all signatures on the diplomas and transactions were his alone and no one else's. Thus, all the information we have indicates that it was a sole proprietorship, and the name of it was Pacific North University. And this is where Nelson got his diploma, and he was going around the country parading as an Egyptologist. Look at that if you'd like. You can actually write to these people, the Attorney General, and you can verify the things that I'm showing here are absolutely correct.
Well, if this is true, then why would Walter Martin feature D.J. Nelson in his book?
Well, that's a good question, because the American Research Center in Egypt has never heard of him here.
Dr. Martin?
No, they've never heard of D.J. Nelson. He wrote to the Egypt. With reference to your inquiry of 12th March, I have no information concerning Dr. D.J. Nelson. His U.S. credentials are not in my capacity to check. The Egyptian Antiquities Organization apparently has never heard of him.
They've never heard of him.
Nope.
In the book, D.J. Nelson calculated King Tut's coffin.
Well, here's something Brother Brown also did. He investigated his background, found out he was a dropout. Here's his report card from the high school records at Billings Senior High School. He's got an F in mathematics. How could he have calculated King Tut's tomb? This guy really took everybody for a ride.
Okay.
Now, also, you ask about Walter Martin. Walter Martin, in his book, The Maze of Mormonism, declares that D.J. Nelson is the most renowned Egyptologist in the world, and that his credentials are completely valid. And he holds him up and travels with D.J. Nelson around the country and parades him as the person who translated the Joseph Smith Papyrus. Eldon J. Tanner of the Mormon Church says he never ever talked to him, never even, introduced himself to D.J. Nelson. This was all put up and was fraudulent in order to deceive the Protestants into turning against the LDS Church.
All right.